Hello, I'm Wes from the Fraser Valley Mountain Bike Association, and I'm going to talk to you about using QGIS to plan trails. Now, if you've been involved in trail planning before, you often know what it takes. You may look at Trailforks, you may look for a place on the map where you think, wouldn't it be cool if we could put a trail here? Then the problem is that you go for a hike in that area where you think the trail should go, and the terrain is brutal, and there's no way that you could ever get a trail in there. So what I'm going to do is show you folks how you can use provincial LiDAR data to save you a bunch of time in that process. So Trailforks does have a slope angle layer, but it's just nowhere near detailed enough to be able to tell you what's happening at the ground. And really, Trailforks, it's not really designed to do that anyway. It's just really meant to be a navigation tool when you're out on the trails. So from a planning perspective, it's not really going to help you out. So we are going to look at using GIS for this process. We're going to be using an open source free GIS platform called QGIS. Now, QGIS is a world unto itself, no pun intended. And what it does is it takes our spherical planet and flattens it out into a map format that we can use. Now, the most common map projection, as they call it, is called Universal Transverse, or CATR. And that takes the planet and divides it up into 60 zones and then flattens out that zone just like you'd flatten out a strip of an orange peel. Now, I'm in UTM zone 10. UTM is not, of course, the only map projection that's out there, but even if you get mapping data in other projections, it's no big deal because QGIS can do the translations for you. Now, QGIS is free. If you just go to download QGIS in your search engine, you can find it here for Windows or for your Mac. So download and install it. So here is a little discussion here on LiDAR and what it is. So in BC, a lot of the province has been overflown with an aircraft that takes a laser scan of the terrain below, and it gets two bounces back. It gets the first bounce, which is the tree layer, and then a lot of those laser points will go through the tree layer and down into the ground below. And that is called the digital elevation model. Now, the digital surface model is the tree layer. We're not interested in that. Aircraft are, so it is used for aircraft navigation, but we're interested in the DEM data. So in the province of BC, we can zoom into the part of the province where we are interested in working and look to see if DEM data is available where you want to plan your trails. And the only DEM data you're probably interested in is the 1 to 20,000 data. The 1 to 2,500 data here, you can see there's a bunch of little rectangles. It's just too small data sets here to really help you plan out your trails. So zoom in on the area where you want to plan your trails. And now you can click on one of those grids and see the data sets that are in there. So we will come back to this once we are set up to import this data. So we're going to go back to QGIS here, and on my screen I have one of these LiDAR data sets. And it just looks like a grayscale blob, and it is an image format, but each of the pixels in this file contains position and elevation data at that pixel. And with this, these GeoTIFFs, these TIFF images, we can get all kinds of amazing information. We can get a simulated land or a simulated light that can be shone on the land here, so it kind of creates these shadows, and you can see where your main Forest Service roads and your spur roads and even hand-built trails have been built. They all get picked up by the LiDAR scan. But what we really want this for is to be able to analyze the slope of the terrain. So here you can see the blue and the green, that's lower slope, and of course red and then black. Well, that's just terrain that there's no point building on anyway. This will of course also show us, just like the hill shading, where we have existing creek beds and other natural features that just, it wouldn't make any sense to try and build a trail in that location. Of course, we can overlay our existing Trailforks trails. And now we can use this to help us plan a lot more intelligently new places where trails can go. So I'm going to walk you through the process of building up a data set like this from scratch. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to create a new project. And what you need to do is to create a folder on your computer where you're going to store your QGIS project and all the data that's needed to create the project and all the data that QGIS will create for you. So here I've got a folder on my desktop where I'm going to put all of this stuff. So back in QGIS here, I'm going to do a save, and I'm going to stick it into that folder here. And now I'm going to go download some of that LiDAR data. So if you get onto the province of BC and you do a Google search for LiDAR BC, it will take you to this webpage where you can zoom in and click on the grid to download some LiDAR data. Now, on any particular grid, there may be one or more data sets that are available. And in this grid here, you folks can see there's data from 2016 and data from 2017. Now, you don't necessarily know what's in that data. And in this particular cell, the 2016 data also includes this little piece of Sumas Mountain across the valley, which I'm not really interested in. So the 2017 data only includes Vetter Mountain. So I'm going to right click and download it. Then on this next grid next door for the other bit of Vetter Mountain, same thing. I'm going to look for the 2017 data because that is just for data, Vetter Mountain. Download that and put it into my project folder. Okay, so now with those two folders downloaded, I'm going to go to QGIS and I'm going to add those layers. So they are, of course, raster layers. So go to the button here on the right, and here I'll choose the 92G grid data, and I will add that. And so here it's going to show up in the list. And then I am going to do the same thing again for 92H. There we go. So now you folks can see those two GeoTIFFs in the background here, and you can see how the contrast is a little bit different. And that's just because the grayscaling here, the coloring of the pixels represents the height of those pixels. So it doesn't affect anything if you leave it, but if you want it to look consistent, just double click on it, and in the symbology section here, make the min and max. Min should be 0 because of course it doesn't go below sea level, and then the max here 1100 for both because there's parts of Vetter that go up to 1100 meters. So if I just make them both the same, it's just less confusing to look at, but it wouldn't affect the analysis that comes later. Now, in QGIS, you need to have your layers panel visible. Make sure you go to the View menu, go down to Panels, and turn on the Layers panel because we're going to be working a lot with it. So what we're going to do here is create a group so that we can put these two layers into kind of like a folder that we can turn off all at once. So this is going to be our DEM folder, and you can just drag and drop these GeoTIFFs into the folder. So now you can turn them on and off. So the first order of business here is to create our contours. So we're going to go to the raster menu here and choose extraction and contour. All right, so we're going to start with our G grid. 10 meter contours is fine. The only thing that we need to do here is instead of saving it to a temporary file, we want it saved to a permanent file, so it's saved with our project. So we're going to put this into our project folder, so I'll just call it contours here, 92G. I'll hit save, and I'll hit run, and it'll take a few seconds to process. Okay, so that's been done, so I'm going to repeat the process for the other layer. H, elevation 10 meter contours is fine, and then saving it to its layer. Okay, so now my two contour layers have been created, but you can see they're kind of oddball colors. Now, the other thing you might notice is that the contours have been put into my group here for my DEM data. And I don't want to turn my contours off when I turn off my DEM data sets. So what I need to do here is to create a new group, and I'll create it for contours. Now, I don't want my contours group as a subfolder of my DEM folder, so I'm going to drag it up a little higher, and you folks can see that little black line that just appears there, right there. And that just moves the contours higher in the layer stack. And now I'll grab my 2 contour layers here and stick them into that folder. And now I can turn off the DEM group because I really don't need to see it anymore. So what we need to do is take these contours and make them black. So double click the layer, go to the symbology section, grab the color menu here, switch to black and hit OK. Now for a line weight, we're going to choose 0.12 millimeters, and that's going to be the default line weight for our contours. Now what we want to do is create 50-meter index contours. So at the top here, switch to rule-based. Then down at the bottom, hit the green plus and put in a label called 50M, just to indicate that this is a 50-meter contour rule that we are creating. Now what we need to do is to grab a little piece of syntax here, which will get QGIS to find our 50-meter contours, and what we want to do is still keep them black, but give them a heavier line weight, and 0.26 is fine. So go ahead and hit OK. Now if we hit apply in the background here, you folks are going to see that the index contours are showing up and that they are graphically differentiated from our regular contours. Now let's throw in some labels. So what we're going to do here is go to the labels section and add rule-based labels, because what we're going to do is just label the 50-meter contours. Hit the green plus, give it 50M for the description, and the filter uses that same syntax again. Make sure though that you change the value from FID, which is just the contour's unique number in the database, to the elevation value, so it actually shows the value of the height of the contour. For text, Arial is fine, but I'm going to make it 8 point. And what I'm going to do is put a little buffer of 0.6 millimeters behind it, so that we'll see a little bit of white around the edge of the text, because it's going to be on top of a black contour line. Go to placement, switch to online, and uncheck above line so that the text is placed right on the contour. And we will have it repeat every 150 millimeters on the map. So when you hit OK, now we get labels on our contours. So now we'll do it for the other layer. Switching to rule-based so that I can put in my 50-meter index contours. This syntax is available as a piece of text in the description below. Now for our labels, again, rule-based, adding a rule at the bottom here. And making sure that you are using the elevation value of your contours. 8-point aerial with a 0.6 buffer. Placed on line, not above, repeating every 150 millimeters. Hit OK. And now we've got it sorted on the other side. So you can just zoom in here and we can see how those contours, or the contour labels, are getting that little bit of a buffer behind it. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to import here, and this is something that most provinces should have public access for, and that is for getting property information. So things about where the property lines are and identifying what's private land versus what's public land. Now in the province of BC, if you go to IMAP BC, that will take you to a place where you can download this information from the province. So zoom into the area that you're interested in, and then go to the Data Sources tab and add provincial layers. So there's 3 layers that you need to add. First of all, go to Land Ownership, scroll down, and find a parcel map BC by owner type. Turn that on and hit the checkbox for owner type and hit OK. Then come back and add the next provincial layer, which is streams. Find the streams network, check the box, hit OK. Finally, Vetter has wildlife habitat areas, so we want to know where those are. Now, not all parts of the province have had wildlife habitat areas surveyed, but you want to make sure that you do include that information in your map. So add that and call it habitat areas. In fact, you can put in wildlife at the beginning of it here. There we go. And look for the approved color themed. Click on that, hit the checkbox, hit OK. Then go to the Export tab here and choose Provincial Layer Download. Then all of the layers that you've chosen will appear in this list so that you can get them emailed to you. So what we want to do is just choose the area around the mountain. So choose Prepare Order. Now, for your coordinates, it's going to be BC Albers to begin with. Switch to the UTM zone that you are in. So for me, that is UTM Zone 10. Now, ArcView shape is fine, but what we need to do here for the area of interest is to choose a custom area of interest where we draw a polygon on the map and get all the information that we want from inside that polygon. So hit Draw Custom. It's going to pop up another map. Go ahead and make it full screen. And then what you've got to do is zoom in to the area where you are working and draw a polygon around that area. So here it is here. So grab that polygon tool and start drawing red lines around the area where you need information. Go back to where you started and double click. So now it says geometry has been captured. You can hit next and then submit AOI. And now when you go back to the previous dialog box, you put in your email address, hit the box for agreeing, and then in a few minutes, this information will appear in your email inbox. Inside that file, or inside the email, there will be a zip file attached. Inside that zip file, you'll find a series of folders. Copy those folders out from the zip file and put them into your QGIS project folder. Okay, so here I've got those different folders, which I have pasted in so I can now bring them into QGIS. So back in QGIS, I'm going to the layer menu and I'm going to be adding a raster layer. So the first layer that I'm going to add here will be the parcels. Now before I do that, I'm going to create a layer group for all of this stuff. So I might just cancel out here, go back to my layers panel and add a new group. So this will be my BC layers here. Now, in the stack order, I want these BC layers to be below the contours. So I'm going to grab my BC layers here and just drag it down a little bit. And now you can see that black line that appears just above DEM. So it's just going to change it so that my BC layers are not a subgroup. Okay, so I'll select that. So now as I add new layers, they're going to go into that group. Okay, so here's the parcels. Find the SHP file. The SHP file is, that's the main folder containing the data we want, and hit open. And hit add. Oh, I was in the raster section. I got to be in the vector section here. So there we go. So now we can add the other stuff. We can just keep on going back to vector data sets here and clicking the button on the side. So now I go back out. I'm going to grab the streams and choose the SHP file from here and then hit add. And then go back to the button here to add one more data set here, which is, of course, our wildlife habitat areas. So again, look for the SHP file in each one of those and add them. So now you folks can see here that I've got kind of everything added. And now, of course, you can see why you want to have your BC layers stacked below your contours. If it's above, then all this data, of course, would obscure your contours, and that's not useful. Now, what we want to do is colorize this information so that we can understand what it is that we're looking at. And I'm going to start with the BC layers, and I'm going to start with the parcels. So when I open it up here, if I go to the symbology section, what I want to do is switch to categorized. And now what I want to do is categorize by the owner type. So once I've made that selection, go down to the bottom and hit classify. So now it's going to show you all the colors by ownership. So here the private lands are red and the crown lands are, you can figure these all out. And of course you can change the colors. So I like to make the private land black because that way it's really clear where the areas are that we can't add trails. Now, the colors, of course, are a little bit overwhelming. So what you can do is double click on the layer and go down to the legend section and add the opacity slider. Now, once you've done that, you'll be able to grab that slider and pull it sideways so you can just decrease the intensity of the layer. Now, for our wildlife habitat areas, I'm going to double click on that and I'm going to go to the symbology section and I'm going to choose categorized here. And we want to categorize by the feature notes. So we hit classify, and this shows us the different kinds of wildlife management areas that are going to be in our area. I'm going to start with a core area. I'm going to change the color here from blue, and I'm going to make it red, so it's just really obvious that I can't do anything in this zone. With the management zone, this is a buffer area around the core areas here, so these are also important not to disturb, so I'm going to make it kind of an orange color here so that, again, really clear that we shouldn't be planting anything in there. The riparian zones, of course, these are alongside creeks, so I will make them a bit of blue color here. And maybe I can just fade it out a little bit so it's not too strong. And so the upland zone green, that's fine too. Or maybe what I can do is make it maybe a slightly darker blue than that other one that I've been working with. So now it's really clear what our wildlife habitat areas are in comparison to our parcels. Now again, the wildlife polygons are pretty strong, so double click on the layer and go down to the legend section and add the opacity slider so that you can ramp down those colors so they're not quite so overbearing. So now we have a really good idea of where private lands are, where we've got wildlife habitat areas to avoid. So this is really great stuff. Now let's start doing some terrain analysis. So what I'm going to do here is to create a hill shading group into which I can put in hill shade analysis. So I'm going to just click here in my DEM layer and I'm going to add a group. Of course, it made it a subgroup, which I will rename hill shading. And this should go above our DEM group. So right there, you can see the thin black line. And I'm going to select that group and have it current as we do the hill shading. So go to raster, analysis, and hill shade. So again, we're basing hill shading on our GeoTIFFs, our DEMs. So I'll start with the G grid. And now what we need to do to create this simulated light is choose which direction it's coming from. 0 is north, 90 is east. So if we want to do noon sun, it would be 180. It's actually better for analysis if you start from southeast or southwest. So that would be 135 and 225 degrees. So I'm going to do southeast at 135. So the only thing that we need to do otherwise is to, under hill shade, save this to its own file. So here we'll call this hill shade 92G. Okay, hit save and run. And now our hill shading is just going to appear here in a few seconds. Now in terms of the layer stack, you want your hill shading just above your DEM, and it's kind of a lower priority, so we're going to put it lower in the layer stack. Okay, so there is our hill shading. So I'll repeat the process for the other grid. Okay, so now the hill shading is in a group so that we can turn the hill shading off when we don't want to use it. Now, probably the most important thing now is to look at what we're going to do next, and that's slope analysis. So again, we are going to create a group for slope, and I'm going to put this slope group above my hill shading group. There it is right there, and I'm going to select the group so that as I create these layers, the data is going to go into that folder. So we're going to go to raster and analysis and choose slope. And just like before, we're going to work with one of these DEM TIFFs. So we need to switch to % because that's usually the way we think about slope instead of degrees. Scroll down and save it to a file here. So we'll just call this slope 92G. So go ahead and save and then hit run, and the resulting file will be created, but it'll be black. So here, when we see the resulting output, it's black. And what we want to do is color code it so that we can understand the slope better. So double click on the newly created slope layer. And what we need to do is to change the way it's being rendered. Choose single band pseudo color. And then from the color ramp menu, choose the drop down and choose create new color ramp. In the resulting menu, choose CPT city and hit OK. Now in this dialog box, switch to the topography section and choose elevation. So now what QGIS is showing us is the minimum and maximum slope that it's encountered on this part of the mountain. 0 to 740% slope, so basically a cliff. Now what we want to do is put in 60 here, because that's really the steepest slope that you'd ever want to try and build trails on. So here, now we can see our slope values, 0, 12, 24, and so on. So when we hit OK, now we get a colorized slope. And so the green areas, of course, are relatively flat versus the black areas there, which are, of course, pretty much a cliff. Okay, so we're going to repeat that now for the other grid. Okay, so our slope analysis is turned on here, and it is pretty strong coloring as well. Now maybe what I'll do here is I will turn off my BC layers here so we can just focus on the slope itself. So this becomes really obvious now where we can build trails and where we can't. So things like existing roads or spur roads hidden underneath a tree layer are all going to show up here as lower sloped areas. So these, maybe if they're not opened already, could be reopened to be used as access trails in the future. And then you can look for areas here where the slope's not too extreme to construct new trails, provided you don't have any wildlife habitat areas in the same vicinity. Now, if you see a wildlife habitat area on the screen and you're kind of wondering what that is, we've got the info button up on the toolbar. And if you have the layer current here, so if I grab my BC layers and select it, when I grab the info button, I can click on something on my screen and it's going to pop up a list of information about what I've clicked. So here, if I click on this, it's going to show you which item it is that I've clicked. So there's the one wildlife habitat area, and you can see that it is tall bugbane. Now this other one here, when I click it, I can scroll down and look at what it is that I'm clicking here, and it's data sensitive. So it's information where they're trying to preserve something that they're trying to sort of keep protected from the public eye. I think what it is, there's potentially hallucinogens available in this zone. So that's why they say it's data sensitive. Now, I'll turn off my BC layers here. So again, I'll switch back to the hand mode here. So when you use the info tool, go back and switch to the hand tool afterwards, so you can just click and drag to pan around on the map. So with this tool set, you can now see why finding the slope of an area is way easier starting in QGIS than it is to just go find it on site. So now the next thing to do here is to bring in our Trailforks layers. So if you go back to Trailforks, go and find your riding area, and then go to the Trails tab. Then choose all your trails in the area, and make sure that you've got all of the trail types here. So why is it not showing them here? So you want to include your secondary roads, your access roads, and I think I've already done that. So you can exclude archived trails, planned trails that aren't yet there. You can exclude all of that, and then hit the filter button to exclude all that information. And then once that's done, scroll down to the bottom and hit the little blue icon here, blue map icon, to download the KML file. So I'm going to do that and stick it into my folder. Okay, so there's my trails. So now I'm going to go to Layer, Add Vector, and I'm going to trails. So go ahead and hit open, and then down at the bottom, hit add, and then hit add layers. And then what you want to do is grab your Trailforks trails and put them to the very top of the stack. So there we are. We're not going to need to put them in a group. So now we can see our Trailforks trails out here. Let's get some labels put on them. Okay, go to the labels section and choose single labels, and by name is fine. So for text here, I will use Arial Narrow, just to make it a little less space on the screen. Arial Narrow, and I will do 9 point and bold, again with the 0.6 mil buffer, and placing it right on the trail line, and I'm not going to worry about repeating the trail label. So now all of our trails have been labeled. Now for extra context, it's really nice if you could add Google Satellite. So to facilitate that, if you go to the View menu and you choose Browser, it'll pop up this dialog box here. So what you need to do is to right-click on XYZ tiles and create a new connection. When you do that, call it Google Satellite, and then copy the syntax from the video description so that you can just paste that in here and get this entry that will add Google Satellite to your project. So once you've done that, Google Satellite will appear here to add it to your project. Here you can see I've just clicked on the very top of the stack. If I double click now on Google Satellite, it adds it in. So go ahead and hit OK. We're just getting it into the right projection. And there's our Google Satellite. Now, you want this to be below your contours. So there it is there. Just watch that line. So our contours and our Trailforks trails are above. Now, for reference, especially since you can't always see where the roads are, if you want to see where your roads interact, it's not going to show up in the Google Satellite view. You've got to add Google Roads. So right-click and add a new connection, and this one's going to be called Google Roads. So here, when we look at it, there's the name and the syntax. This syntax here is also below in the video description. So now you can close the browser and you can move your Google Roads down too, so they're just kind of right here above your Google Satellite. So what this will do is allow you to see your roads in the context of your map, and that's really good for reference if you're looking for different access points to create one for your trail network. Okay, so we've got Google Roads and Google Satellite on there. Now, that's all great to have. How about planning a trail? So we've got the slope included now, and we can kind of see where the low slope areas are, and now we can start thinking about where we might want to put a new trail. Now, for us, we have a new trail that we're trying to create on the south end of Vetter that's going to go from the Forest Service Road, and it's going to go up the mountain and over the hump over to a new trail that the city of Chilliwack is constructing. Now at this point, it's going to be really helpful to have our parcel layers turned on. So I'm going to turn off the wildlife areas here, and I'm going to have my private lands here, which you folks can see in black. I really want to make sure that I don't try to put a trail anywhere where the land is black. Here, these Untitled Provincial, I think I want to make that a different color. That's going to be less intrusive while I'm working. There we go. So what I want to do is get a trail up from here to the other side of the mountain. And again, avoiding these private lands. Now that blue stuff, municipal, I see. I want to make that green too, so that I don't get confused here. There we go. Okay. Now, what I can do, of course, is I can turn off some of these other ownership types so that I'm only seeing the private land, so I know that I should avoid those in my trail plan. So now what we need to do is to add a new layer for our planned new trail. So go to the layer menu and choose create a new geopackage layer. So this is QGIS's standard data format. So we'll call this new trail. There we go. And the kind of geometry these things are is typically a multi-line. Now make sure that the project CRS matches that of the project. Now where did it get this CRS? From those GeoTIFFs. So next thing here is we want to give a name field to this layer so that we can not just have a number for the layer that we've, or for the line that we draw, so we can actually give it a name. So here it is here, 80 characters long. That's fine. So go ahead and hit OK and drag your new trail up to the top of the stack. Now if you want, you can rename the layer at any time that you want. And here we can double click it so that we can change the symbology of it. So of course what I want to do, this is going to be a blue trail, is I want to make it blue and I want to make it a little more obvious on the screen. So 0.5 millimeter. There we go. Now I just realized, speaking of blue lines, that I forgot to make the streams, which is this layer here, to make that more obvious. So I want to make that 0.6. Really nice thick line, and I want to make it kind of a dark blue, and I want to label it too. Single label, Arial, and I'll make it 9-point bold, again with that 0.6 buffer. There we go. So just so that we don't forget about those creeks when we are doing our trail plans. Okay, so what we need to do now is click on the new trail layer that we've created and go and find the pencil icon on the toolbar. So now we are ready to start drawing this new trail. Just a few buttons down, there's the add line feature. Click it and then zoom in on where you are planning to start your trail. Now here they've got this blue line where they say where the creek is, but the LiDAR data shows this little gully here. And that's really where the trail is. And we're going to start from the road. So when you do your first click, the second click, you can see there's these little faint dots that appear. So it just kind of tells you where your line is going to go. So there's click number 1, here's click number 2. And it creates a thin red line that you can now use to trace your way up the mountain. And I have no idea if these grades work. And in fact, I should have come along here. So I'll just backtrack. Unfortunately, you can't change your path while you were creating the line for the first time. So you got to come back and do it later. So I'm going to work my way up the mountain here, and then I'm going to come across and try and avoid the super steep parts, but I might be able to thread a trail through here. So I'm just going to keep on going and working my way up the mountain. So you can just see I'm clicking away here, creating different vertices. And I'll try and create points here where I can create a switchback and work my way up the hill, trying to keep it not too steep because we want this to be an adaptive mountain bike trail. Okay, so I've gotten along a bit of the ways here. Now I'm not complete. When you right click now, this will finish the trail. You can make it longer, of course, but for now we'll just right click to end. And it pops up a dialog box here where it's going to give the trail a number, and it's just going to auto increment that number. But now we can give it a name of our own choice. We'll call it AMTB climb, and I'll say .1. It's my first attempt here. Okay, so there's our new trail. Now the question is, how steep is it? So we're going to check that out. But first I want to talk about how you edit the trail. So the trail layer will show a pencil on it when it is in editing mode. If you hit the pencil icon again, you can save your changes, and you can see that the pencil icon goes away. So if you select the trail and hit that yellow pencil icon, now you can go back to editing mode, which is in this drop-down menu here, and you want the vertex tool for the current layer. So click that, and as you hover over your trail, you're going to see that these red dots appear. Those are the vertices for your trail, and if you click on one, you've selected it. And now you can move to a new point and click again to relocate it. So click. Click to move it, and then if you want to add a new vertex, find one of the midpoints in between and you can see you get a little plus, click it, and you can now add some extra detail to the path of your new trail. Now, if you remember, we hadn't really finished the trail yet. And so when you are in editing mode, when you move your cursor onto the end of the line, a little gray plus appears, and when you put your cursor right on the gray plus, it turns red. This allows you to add more segments to the line so you can just keep on going as long as you want. Now, again, you can hit the save button here to save your edits, or if you hit the pencil icon to toggle editing mode, QGIS will ask you if you want to save your work. So go ahead and hit save. So it's just like that. Hit the pencil icon, then choose the vertex editor. And so there's some other editing modes that I should point out to you. If you click on one of your vertices and you click it and then hit the delete button, that makes it go away. So again, hit the plus and then drag to where you want that new vertex to appear. And you can also drag a line segment. So here you can see that whole line segment is being moved, or you can just move a vertex. Okay, so now that you know how to edit the path of a line, let's save it. Actually, we don't have to save it here. We're going to use the profile tool. Now you're going to need to download this plugin. So go to the plugins menu and go to install plugins and search for profile. That will show the profile tool in this list. Choose install plugin. Then hit close, and then the profile tool will appear both on your toolbar and in the plugins menu here under profile tool. So click on the profile tool, and it's going to pop up the dialog box that you see at the bottom. Now, what you can do is drag it by its title bar so it's not docked. And here I'll make it a little bit narrower. You can drag it to a second monitor if you have one. And what we want to do is we want to add, see, it's docked my layer toolbar here. It's annoying, it does that automatically and I wish it wouldn't. Okay, so what I want to do is go down to my DEM layers here and find out and add basically the DEM data set that my trail is under. In this case, it's H. So I click on H and I add the layer. Then I go back up to my new trail, and from the drop-down menu here in the bottom right, choose selected layer. So now it shows you, and you can see as I move my cursor along the path, the little red dot moves and it kind of shows me where I've got steeper areas of the trail that I'm creating because of the path. So overall, I'm going from, now here you can use your middle button to pan. I'm going from 80 meters of elevation to 140. So that's about 60 meters. And I'm doing it over 700 meters of trail length. So that's under 10%. So that's pretty good. But that's average grade. You can see here I've got some grades here where it's quite a bit steeper. And then I should try to find some way to flatten out the grade. So what you can do is you can move along here until you see some place where the grading is getting pretty tough. And maybe what you can do then is zoom in. So here I'm using my middle mouse button to pan, and then using my wheel to zoom in. So maybe what I'll do here is I'll take this trail, and I'm going to use the vertex editor, and I'm going to move this vertex around like so. And I'm going to move all these segments around so that I'm going to come through this zone here and try and see if I can flatten out the path. And maybe what I can even do here is add a zigzag. So do a little switchback in here to try and make this a little easier to climb. Okay, now that I've done this edit, I can save it. And once I've saved it, all I need to do is switch between temporary polyline and selected layer to see the changes that have been made to the profile. So here, this is actually pretty good. I made this a lot nicer of a route. So once this is done now, and I'm happy with the grading of my route, now what I want to do is export this so that I can put it into Gaia and do a recon and see how the route is going to work boots on the ground. Because Revit is just capturing the ground layer here, and there could be big trees that have fallen that are in the way, and who knows what other kinds of obstacles. But from a terrain perspective, this does at least work. So I'm going to finish editing, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on my new trail and I'm going to export it. So export, save features as, and I'm going to do it in KML format. So let me just create a file for it here. And save. Now I don't want to add it to the map, so just uncheck it and hit OK. So now what we can do is we can add that new trail to Gaia so that we can use the Gaia GPS app on our phone and walk the proposed route. So we are now going to open up Gaia. Okay, so if you've got a Gaia account, you should be able to, on your browser, import that new trail. So zoom into the area where you're going to be planning the new trail and choose Import Data. Okay, so there's my KML, so I'll hit Open. And now, there it is. There's the new trail. You can see it there in red. And if I hit Save, it's going to add it to my Gaia routes list. Once you've done this, you can go to your phone, open up the Gaia GPS app, and go into your saved items area, do a pull down from the top to sync, and that will allow this new trail to be downloaded to your phone. So then you can go and walk it and just see if the trail route works. Now the last thing I'm going to show you folks is how to do 3D visualization with QGIS, which is amazing. Now, what you need to do first of all is decide which layers you want visible before you start creating your 3D view of the mountain. So I'm going to leave everything that's on the view here visible. If you wanted to, you could turn off the slope, maybe turn on Google Satellite so that you have that available when you are looking at this in 3D. If I wanted to make my contours more visible with Google Earth turned on, you can make your contours white. I've done that before. The other thing that you can do is you can double click on your Google Satellite layer and you can add the opacity slider to it too. So if you wanted to just kind of pull down the intensity of Google Satellite, you could do so. So the 3D view, go to the View tab and choose 3D Map Views and choose New 3D Map View. Now the next thing that you need to do is to grab the 3D map view here and make the window a bit bigger. Now what we want to do is disable docking mode. It's super annoying, especially for the 3D view. So I'll uncheck it and then I'll make the mapping window here a bit bigger. In fact, I can make it full screen. So what we want to do is to go up to the wrench icon here and choose Configure so that we can make this use our 3D terrain. So click on the terrain option, choose DEM, and then choose the grid that you are wanting to look at. So here I'll choose my H grid and hit OK. So it'll take a few seconds to generate, but now it's going to appear on the screen. Okay, so use your left mouse button to pan, use your middle button to zoom in and out. Also your wheel will do that too, but if you right click and hold, it gives you a nice smooth zoom in and out. And then holding down your middle button will allow you to change the direction, your horizontal angle. There we go. So left to pan, right up and down to change your direction of, change the amount of inclination, and then middle button and from side to side to orbit. So here I can click and left drag to bring the mountain closer to me, and then right click and drag from side to side to change the angle at which you are looking at the mountain. So as you can imagine, this is a great set of tools to help you plan trails and do it a lot smarter than wandering around in the forest trying to figure out where a trail could go. I hope you found this video useful. If you've got any questions, send me an email at wes@fvmba.com. Thanks for watching.